actually, on the flip side, at the end of the year, they picked up 2 crucial wins in kind of relegation 4-pointers against KR and Broncos, which meant they didn't actually have much to worry about once they actually picked up that win at London, obviously. Injury-wise, you could kind of pick on that probably, certainly to their kind of strike players out wide. We've picked on Tupu and players like that have missed a lot of time.
Well, that left wing for the second half of the season, that left edge was out, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Ashurst, Tupu and Johnston, who were so great the year before, all missed the second half of the season, basically.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like they were able to kind of make up for that kind of gap. I suppose in terms of mid-season, I think in terms of reviews, Tanganoa's had good kind of, a lot of people say good things about him, so he was a kind of a bright spot, but yeah, a bit of a struggle for Wakefield, and I don't see that necessarily changing very much. Anyone else got anything to say about Wakefield before we move on to the fan view that we had?
Just that you summed it up very well by saying this was the old Wakefield. I mean, a couple of crucial wins towards the end of the season to make themselves look safe.
Yeah,
that's what we were so used to.
Yeah,
you haven't mentioned David Fafita, and David Fafita had some really big performances in the first half of the season, and probably was another player that then suffered through how much he played through injuries. Maybe he should have taken some time off in the middle of the season instead of trying to play through all those injuries. So Wakefield definitely were a side. I think they can't afford to lose as much of their star power as they lost. Ninth was possibly a reflection of that, but they were never ever a playoff contender this season, it felt like.
No, as you said, that was a return to the old days. The only fan view we had was from John Humphreys, and he was succinct, just saying, walking wounded. That's probably pretty accurate, but at least you're still walking.
Do you think you'd have more time now he'd stop today programme?
There you go.
Leeds' turn, Sarah.
Yep. Leeds finished 8th. In terms of predictions, the fans thought that they would finish 5th. Alan and Mark both thought that they'd finish 3rd.
That's mental when you look at it now, isn't it?
Yeah. Tim went for 4th and I went for 5th.
I mean, where did it all go wrong? We were so optimistic for this Rhino side.
I had them picking winning the bloody cup and all. I don't know what. Jesus, anyway.
It does show like how difficult predictions are to make, doesn't it? Because you are just looking at a list of names. And, as they say, you can, it looks good on paper, but you don't win any matches on paper, do you?
I still think Wakefield in 7th was probably my stupidest.
No. Leeds in 4th.
Anyway, so, yeah, I mean, Leeds. Maybe if we look at the fan views first. So Dan says, Leeds, 3 out of 10. Took a while to get things right, which nearly got us relegated. But as everyone keeps saying, we're in a transition period and think we've started getting partnerships in place for the future. Great to see a few more academy graduates getting more first-team game time. Nick Chidler said, a bit like a soap opera at times. I'm glad it's over. A few good performances, a few better signings bedding in. Drop girl drama. And a major overhaul of our squad. Things can only get better. Smudge says, average this season, enough said. Archie wasn't quite so positive. He said, shite. Dr. Bob Phillips says, silence with only the distant howls of were-rabbits punctuating the gloom. And Cutthroat Jake says, great rebuilding season. After losing so many greats, Leeds outperformed my expectations. The season only started in June, didn't it? And I think, really they've sort of covered a lot off, haven't they, there? There were a lot of major issues, certainly early on in the season. We wondered at one point whether, the amazing could happen and Leeds could get relegated. Richie Myler playing for them, who actually played better when he wasn't on the pitch. And I think my other comment was about how fat Trent Merrin was. So, he looked
But it's
fat
all right, kids.
fit.
He's staying for another year.
Yeah. I hear Weight Watchers are changing their plans, so maybe he'll be okay. I think for me, my concerns are still, what influence Sinfield is having over the coaching staff.
I think that's a pertinent point, isn't it? Because a lot of that early part of the season seems to have been a personality clash between a head coach who clearly didn't get to implement as much as what he wanted to, with a director of rugby who seemed to be too much involved.
Yeah, I mean that's how it looked from an outsider's point of view, I think. And yes, they had their glossy new stadium, but you did think for a while, are they ever going to need to open it all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a year of, it was the first coaching departure, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously it's a clear misstep, isn't it? And, I think Sir Kev's made a few of them, hasn't he, recently? And yet, I think this Leeds spent the rest of the year kind of trying to get over that mistake. I would argue they went in the wrong direction, and they spent basically from mid-season onwards trying to right the ship.
And there were some miserable wins, like the win at Magic Weekend against London was a miserable, scabby win. And I know everyone has scabby wins along the way, but it felt like that was as good as it got. I mean, the high point of Leeds Rhino season was the shittest drop goal attempt you've ever seen go over. It was fantastically shit, don't get me wrong. It was absolutely awesome.
That's what the one the coach was screaming, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that is their highlight reel of this season. I mean, I'll mention two positives because we've not mentioned anything other than how nice the stadium is now. So I'll mention two. Harry Newman was great every time I saw him play, busting tackles, making breaks, looking like a starter for now as well as for the future. And Ash Hanley actually did pretty good stepping into Ryan Hall's shoes on that left wing and was a very good try-scoring weapon.
Yeah, and I've got to admit, I think until people got the measure of him.
Yeah, him and Hurrell.
Conrad Hurrell was a great player as well. A great weapon. It's just a shame he didn't have the players around him. Anyway, we have an audio review from the man down under, Rich Wilkinson. So we'll see what his take on it was.
This is Rich Wilkinson giving my Leeds Rhinos 2019 season review. I hoped for better things with new signings and a new coach. Lola here was always going to be a risk. He'd been rocks and diamonds in the NRL and out of first grade for a while. I wasn't convinced, and unfortunately it turned out that way. I felt Ferner was the right man for the job, but results weren't looking great. We jagged a few good wins early doors, but the defeat to London about 7 or 8 games in really kind of had the writing on the wall, and unfortunately before it got started for Ferner, it was kind of over and he was out. It was a bit of a shock to everybody and didn't look great for the club. We saw Watkins go. He needed to go. He's not a leader at the club and he was a shadow of his former self, and you could just tell something weren't right there. And with Agar being made the interim appointment, I wasn't convinced. I've still got concerns, but in the end it worked out well. The pick-up really was the mid-season signings, bringing in Martin and Siu Manafanai. The signing of Louis is a low point for me. He'll never sit right with me, and I'm not happy about it. But it's hard to see Leeds fans cheering him, to be honest. Lucky for us, we got our shit together, and Merrin really come to the fore as a true leader. I'm so glad that he's coming back, and it already feels like a new signing. He's genuinely our captain for the future, hopefully. You could see the spirit in the team got better. and the defence got better. And Agard, did work with the guys, and we looked a lot better. Results turned out our way in July. Luckily, I was over in England to see some of those wins, and we did all right. Luckily for us, we kept digging in, and we eventually got the job done. I think we're lucky for Leeds that we had no injuries. We were pretty limited by that. If we had done, we could have easily got relegated, and I do feel sorry for some of the teams below us who were obliterated by injuries, and we were still in that dogfight. High points for the season were obviously the signings Connie and Merrin. Connie had a great season. He can be rocks and diamonds, but the fans love him. Merrin is a true leader and an absolutely underrated player, even though he's world class. And I think Reece Martin turned out great, as did Siu Manafanai, and the coming to the fore are Handley and Young Newman. They're the real highlights. Unfortunately, the lowlights are the signing of Louis. I'll never appreciate that. And I'm not convinced by the permanent appointment of Agar, but time will tell. We've got Gale on board. Hopefully he can stay fit and do a job. I think Leeds can have a pretty good season, but I think a pretty good season will be between 5th and 7th at best. Cheers, thanks very much. And thanks to Mark and the crew for all your efforts. Much appreciated.
From Australia to Spain to talk about Catalans, Tim.
Yeah, so you, the fans, had Catalan finishing in 6th. Alan, you had them in 5th. Mark, you had them in 5th. Sarah, you had them all the way down in 10th, and I actually got this one right and had them in 6th.
7th, Tim.
7th.
Oh. No. I actually did not get a single one anyway. Oh well. 6th, 7th, still doesn't really matter, does it?
Mid-table obscurity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no one's going to remember it. It's not going to be a season-long DVD, is it? But it's that period at the end. Those last 5 games where they just checked out. They were quite literally on the beach. Where you just think, really, did they deserve to finish as high as 7th even with that? I suppose highlights for them probably more an off the field than an on the field highlight would be having that game at the Camp Nou, and having that occasion and being able to bring that. Obviously, we're looking to build on that success in 2020. Oh, hang on, no.
It was a fantastic occasion, and it was probably Catalan's best performance of the season, and it came with no halfback. So that, I don't know if that leads neatly into you slagging off every creative player they had this season, other than the fullback.
You see, calling them creative players is probably where you're going wrong.
Yeah,
I think it's. I think it's a disservice to many an actual creative player. The good side is that their spine in general was more balanced, but still
they were all evenly shit.
They were there. They turned up, but again. As we always talked about with Catalan, I feel every year I've done this, they lost 11 out of 16 away from home. So Catalan, not being able to play away is, not exactly news. And I think that's going to hamper them in future. If they can't find a way to get that, and they'd only be a small, some injury crisis away from being in proper trouble, potentially. And then towards the end of the season again, you had good old Bernard come out criticising some of that's experienced players for their disruptive attitude and saying that they were wrecking things. And I don't know what's going to be going on there next year. So we shall see. I mean, it's as ever with Catalan, it's all a bit more turbulent than it needs to be. And just when you think they're on the verge of a new dawn. Able to build on that Challenge Cup win, then, once again we're back to crazy things. And, will Steve McNamara last the season next year? Who knows? But
we keep thinking he's not going to last very long, and he keeps lasting.
I can't explain how he got. He already had a deal for next year. How did he get an extension after the second half of this year? I don't know if it was a message to those players that you mentioned, Tim, but it's hard to be positive about anything about the Catalans because they were so poor in the second half of the season. Well, basically from May onwards, they were diabolical.